Hi, everyone. Hopefully, everyone is doing safe. Sorry, let me just cut that out. So, yes, hopefully, everyone is doing well and keeping safe. Can't believe it's August already. 2020 is nearly over. I can't believe it's been another year. Today, I'll be talking to Tete.Depunk from Instagram. She has been developing a story that takes place in the 18th to 19th centuries in Imperial Russia. She's always been a huge fan of Tolstoy's War and Peace, and this story is a bit of a homage to her love for that book, as I understand. Her story has been in the works for many years. When we first met in 2016, she had reimagined the main character, then called Andrei, as a serf who later becomes a Cossack. In 2020, she's finally come back to his story. My first question to you is, Andrei is now called Gleb. So, how did you come to this name? Why do you think Gleb is a better name for Andrei?
It's actually sort of a interesting process how that name came to be. It's actually because one of our previous conversations led to the creation of another character who's actually a descendant of this character. And of course, he carried that name. So I do have a character named Andre, but he is in the 20th century, just having dealt with the Russian Civil War and the rise of communism. So he's a descent of this character. So I figured, even though, like in many families, everyone's naming their kid after their father and so on and so on, I just felt it would be better as an individual to give him a different name to differentiate this character from Andre in the 20th century. So I was trying to look for a name that would fit him, and I thought Gleb would be a good name. It's a very good, solid Russian name. It's pretty popular. It's kind of timeless. It's sort of like Constantine. Like no matter what time period it is in Russia, somebody's bound to be named Constantine or Gleb. Those are kind of like safe names. They're not like names that go out of style, like say Arcady. Like, I mean, unless your parents a hipster in Russia, I don't really see a lot of modern Russian people with the name Arcady or something. So I think Gleb is a safe, solid name, like I said, Constantine and names like that.
I see. What's Gleb's surname, by the way?
His surname, I don't have it planned like before his Cossack identity, but because he is Andrei's progenitor, the originator, so to speak, progenitor, ancestor, if you want to call it, it will be Novoshkanov, which, yeah.
Okay.
So we're still
Means
sticking with that
newly
name.
baptized, right? I think you told me before.
Yes, it does. And ironically, well, not ironically, but surprisingly, a friend of mine from Russia, she told me she was really impressed that I knew a name like that. And of course, you had helped me find that name, because she said there's only like maybe 10 different families with that name, because it's kind of a name that a lot of people change in modern times because nobody really wants a long name like that. And also, like, nobody really wants a name like that says newly baptized or no new convert or something,
Mm-hmm. That's
so
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, she
So
even
what
found
are,
a boat with a guy.
oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah,
So
like
what is
yeah.
the reason why his last name is Novokshinov? What was the reasoning behind that?
I think it was because I was looking into like Cossack surnames, and a lot of them are kind of a wild salad bag, if you will, of names. Some of them, don't necessarily have, like that nice core, Slavic sound to it, because, Cossacks are sort of a conglomeration of different ethnic groups and stuff like that, because it's a very, if you will, it's sort of bohemian. And I did read where you have various different ethnic groups being compiled, and a good number of them had taken names like that or related to something either religious or like a quality or something. And something like Novoshkanov would not be such a far stretch for, say a Cossack kind of wants to have a more Russian sounding name, because he might have like like an ethnic name, and he sort of wants something that's like a little bit easier for people to remember or pronounce. He might go with something like that. Some might just kind of take a first name and then kind of add a suffix to it and then just go with that. So I think that's why I when I saw that, and I thought, well, this works really good. It has a nice sound to it, and it sounds logical because a number of people who would take up the identity of Cossack or be involved in that would probably take such a name. It's not a common name, but at the same time, it's not an impossible name as well.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Originally, I recall that you chose this surname because he was Kalmuk or Tartar, and the implication was that they were newly converted to Orthodox Christianity, right?
Right. That was
Mm-hmm.
initially in that incarnation of the story. Yes.
Mm-hmm. But now that he's only, I believe, half Tartar, how does that change anything? Because his surname is still from his father, right?
It's not really. No, his
Oh, no, no,
surname.
sorry, yes.
I'm sorry. Yeah. No. 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 Um. I think. Well, here's the thing. Gleb in this story, I think he has, because his arc is very different. I mean, the concept is still relatively in the nutshell the same, but his name. So I don't have his name prior to him taking up a Cossack identity. I haven't thought of that yet, but I think when he does take up the Cossack identity, he's not taking up the name of his foster dad, really. I think he wants to. His foster dad encourages him to take up his own surname and not rely on anybody for his identity. Rely on
I
himself
see.
for
Mm-hmm.
his identity. And I think Gleb likes that name. It sounds cool. It sounds you know how do I say it? It has sort of a, how do I say? I think it symbolizes a lot of things for Gleb, because I think Gleb chose it when he was at a very vulnerable state in his life at a very young age, and I think he was very eager just to get rid of his past and just start things new. So it's not really so much about religious conversion, but more or less about being reborn as a different person,
Mm-hmm.
and even taking on different names and such.
I think that makes sense because baptism is kind of like being reborn again, right? It's basically like a symbolism for rebirth. So
It
rather than
is.
being converted to Christianity, it's just about him taking on the new identity of being a Cossack.
Yes, essentially it
Mm-hmm.
is. It is. Yeah. So it has less to do with any religious ideology, and it's more or less um, becoming a new person, having a new identity as a Cossack, a new life. You're no longer that young serf from the estate. You are now on your own. You are a free man. You can do what ever you bloody well please. I mean, well, with responsibly, but I mean, you're the master of your own fate now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Okay. And previously, why had you chosen the name Andre?
I had always loved the name Andre. I love how it's spelled in Russian. I think it looks very sexy. Of course, in Russian, it's pronounced like Andrei. So, like most of the time we say Andre because we're thinking of like the French variation, which makes sense because, like in the high literate circles, people are speaking French, so they're going to use that variation. But I've always liked the name Andre or Andre, and I like that it means man, which is it's just basically Greek for man, andros. And I feel like that's kind of like a good name to start off with, because you're just like, oh, this is a man, this is a person, a human. And I've always liked it. And it also means manly too, which we can contest that in the
Mm-hmm.
20th century, where he's very manly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah,
I see.
manly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Good
yeah,
ideas. So
yeah.
my second question is about who Gleb ends up with. So in the past, I remember that you always had a lot of problems determining who he would eventually marry.
Yeah.
Now, as you told me, he is going to marry Aysun, who is an Armenian who grew up in the Turkish Empire. How did you decide that he was going to end up with Aysun out of all the different love interests that you had previously brainstormed for him?
I think it's because Isoon makes the most sense. I think there was the most chemistry that was shown, there was most dynamic. The story was more logical, and there was more to establish their connection. Like they had more of an experience to lay a foundation for a solid marriage, because the other love interests were kind of shoehorned in. Some of them were pretty ridiculous. Like Lolli's story was just so convoluted it bordered on a parody, and Donya was lifeless. Like Donya had as much animation as a pillow. Yeah.
Was Lolli that convoluted? I don't really remember.
If I recall correctly, I was sort of going back on like little notes I had taken and crazy stuff I posted on DeviantArt. Um, apparently, um, I think I was gonna have something where Andre was like dealing with Georgians and he was forced to marry like this Georgian chieftain's daughter, and they kind of hated each other at first. Well, she didn't really hate him. She just thought it was weird, like, but he didn't want to just like drag this, little woman around. And I guess they eventually fell in love or something. It was pretty ridiculous. Although I liked designing Lolli, she's kind of fun to draw with all those pretty Georgian dresses because I love Georgian fashion. It's like bomb. But it was pretty silly because, I mean, how do you get yourself in a situation like that? Like, couldn't he just, like, after he gets to the Russian border and he's in more like advanced Russian stuff, maybe he could just like drop her off somewhere, like, here, I'll drop you off in this town, bye, and then, leave her. Yeah.
Yeah. So how
Yeah.
do Gleb and Isoon meet?
That's a very good question. It's it sort of deals with a main plot point that I've always had. So basically, Gleb is involved in the various Turkish conflicts that were affecting the Russian Empire at this time, and how do I say? We'll kind of delve into the morality and ethics of it later. But essentially, he gets captured by a Turkish officer, and he's taken prisoner. And I guess he's taken deeper into Turkish territory. And I was sort of trying to figure out what would be the pivotal point of how they meet, because it's one thing for you to encounter someone, but it's one thing to have something that makes you want to go forward and interact with a person and then help them and risk a lot of things. What would prompt a very cautious, smart person like Isoon to do that? Because she is pretty smart. I mean, to survive, what is basically servitude and kind of like softcore, softcore slavery in the Turkish Empire at that time, as a young kid and then growing into a young woman, you have to be pretty bloody smart. Yeah. So I was trying to think of, and also, like I said, Gleb is he is nowhere near as here's the thing, like Andre is hot-headed. So 20th century Andre, he's hot-headed, he's bullheaded, but he does have sort of a very nice goodness about him that people like. You know what I mean? Like, he may be, a bellowing bull, but he is a very good and loyal friend, and he can be cheerful and funny when he wants to. Gleb, on the other hand, I just sort of came to the realization that Gleb is just very, very cold, almost just has kind of like he's just by default stern. So he has stronger Sesshomaru vibes than Kai does. I think Kai failed on that. Um, so what would prompt someone like Isoon to help him out? Uh, I'm just sort of I think I'll just throw it out here for right now. I think essentially what happens is, I think Isoon is, traveling to go to her new position, because after her old position kind of ran out, she's going to this new position, and I guess she's traveling along a road, and I'm trying to think of what would lead to some sort of conflict between her and maybe this Turkish official and his subordinates. And I'm not sure how that would go, but I think there is something like that, and I think, Gleb is thinking about using that distraction to escape, and he does, but I guess he has sort of an attack of consciousness, so he decides to go back and help Isoon, even though that means he gets captured and stuff, recaptured again. So I think that's what happens. I think that leaves a very deep impression on Isoon, that this guy would just go ahead and get himself recaptured to help her out. And I think that's what prompts her to risk everything and help him out. And like I said, she does have her own motivations for this too. She, would like to get the heck out of the Turkish Empire and go for, be her own, be the master of her own fate as well. Yeah.
I think that's really great from
Oh
what you
yeah,
have told me. Yeah, it's
yeah,
really
thank
great.
you.
It's coming together really well. And I think, based on what we've learned about character development, this is much more natural than what you had, 2016, when you were
Yes,
not really sure how they met and you always changed everything pretty much all the time.
exactly. I think 2016 was very much a train wreck, a kaleidoscopic train wreck all the time. You never knew what train wreck you were going to open the door and find out.
Well, I don't think it's a train wreck. You did some really great stuff back in 2016. I thought your research was really well done. You had so much knowledge of the time period and everything. It was just that sometimes it got a bit confusing because you changed a lot of things all the time. So I didn't know when you changed something, for example.
Right. I believe you're right about it. It's I think that's always been a problem with my works, is that they change and constantly evolve, and it's nice when you finally reach a point where it finally all makes sense and you don't have to change it. Like, it's good, it's cut, put it
Mm-hmm.
on, the, the, however they say in film, cut,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I think Isoon was always one of my favorite characters in this series because she was so lively and she was, she stood out from the cast, really. Like, she was also mischievous, she really had a zest for life.
She does. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, and I think that's, I think there's going to be a lot of depth to her too. Like, not only is she mischievous, she likes to play pranks, you know, she she has a lot of energy and zest, which makes a nice foil for someone like Gleb. Like I said, it's a little bit like Gerda and Kai, only in a more different dynamic. Um, but I think I was thinking about this last night. I think that Isoon, given her experiences, I mean, even though, there's nothing like of that nature that, we were discussing, that we would not have
Mm-hmm.
much of that. I think she still has a lot of trauma and, sad things happening to her. I think maybe she kind of has sort of a sadder, darker side to her. Um, a bit like Anthe from Utena, but
Mm-hmm.
not like that, like
Mm-hmm.
not
Mm-hmm.
dream like that. But I think she does have a lot of. I think one of her biggest fears is being, left alone. I think, or not having, or being stranded with no help. I think those are her greatest fears, and just being abandoned,
Mm-hmm.
or. And I think that, it plays a kind of a big part of shaping her personality. And I think that's why she does a lot of pranks and mischief, and she always tries to be cheerful, because I think she's always trying to run away from that that great dark thing of depression and fear.
Mm-hmm. That's very realistic. A
Yeah,
lot of
yes,
the
that's what I
times the
mean.
people who are the most cheerful are actually the most depressed. Mm-hmm.
Exactly, so
Mm-hmm.
true. Yeah, so she does have to, you know really deal with a lot of that dark stuff, and I think it kind of comes out, it emerges more as she, develops kind of at first a tumultuous bond, and then finally a loyal bond with Gleb.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How does
Yeah.
Gleb deal with, his darkness, his inner darkness, compared to Isoon?
That's a very good question. It's kind of the opposite, really, where Isoon is cheerful and zesty and all that. I think Gleb, because of his, well, I think Gleb's fears are losing people. He doesn't want to get attached to people because he's done it about 3 times in his life, and it's been devastating for him. And it's really hard for him to recover because it's so hard for him to open up. I mean, um, he just doesn't want to trust people because he's just very, very cynical. Like he's the most cynical man on earth. And I think how he deals with it, I believe that he just sort of freezes himself from the outside, from within out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he just doesn't allow himself to feel happy or have a good time. He's mostly, like I said, by default, he is just on cruise control. He is very, very cold and stern. He would probably make Kai look actually cheerful by comparison, because
Yeah.
at least Kai's kind of like family oriented.
Mm-hmm.
But Gleb isn't that way. I think Gleb also is kind of ignoring the pain of loss or the impending fear of loss, by not getting attached to anybody in the future. So he plans. And I think also kind of throwing himself into ambition, like of higher military achievements. Like
Mm-hmm.
he wants to get into the more organized branches of military. So he's kind of becoming part of those Cossacks that want to be a little bit more, I guess, for lack of a better word, more westernized, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
because there is kind of like sections, if you look at it, of the military history of Cossacks where some of them are more ethnic and more loosely banded, and that's where we kind of get the stereotypes, like the dresses and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
like the Georgian stuff and the caps and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the more like westernized ones, and they're the ones that kind of adapted more of the standard uniform and organization, so they were kind of able to kind of earn their place with like imperial stuff and everything.
I see.
So
Yep.
kind of sort of like the Dawn host compared to the other hosts. Like
Mm-hmm.
like Dawn host is obviously very westernized. It's very like rooted in standard imperial stuff. And then try to compare that host, that group or Cossack nation, if you will, to like something like Ural Cossacks or
Mm-hmm.
something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Gleb is from the Dawn host, right?
Yes, he's from the
Mm-hmm.
Dawn host.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so it's like the most biggest organized one. It's the most like westernized one. And it's the one that we have the most information about, and it
Mm-hmm.
makes
Mm-hmm.
sense because it really, how do I say, they really stuck their thumbs in the pies of Imperial Russia, all the
Oh,
good
okay.
ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Before, when Andre was half Kalmyk, was he supposed to be from the Dawn host or was he from like the Kalmyk host?
Well, essentially, there is a Don Kalmyk host. So there is,
Oh, okay.
yeah. So the Don has a separate but associated branch of their host, which is Don Kalmyk, because the way everything was situated, like the Don host is here, and then like the Don Kalmyks are right here. So the Don Kalmyks, they pretty much adapted like a lot of what the other Dons were doing, like adopting like a lot of Western stuff, and I mean, and
Mm-hmm.
you can see that like in photographs from the Civil War and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it makes kind of an interesting addition to that. So yeah, that's actually one of the reasons why I kind of went with that, because I thought, well, here's a connection, it'll work. We'll see the formation of this. But unfortunately, there wasn't that much information on that because that was kind
Mm-hmm.
of in its infancy. Um, and how do I say it kind of fell apart because I just didn't want to go forward with it because it was starting to feel wrong for all the wrong reasons,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't have enough information on that because they didn't really establish themselves that closely, with being part of the Dawn until like 1870s, 1880s, and then further into the where the like the whole Civil War thing happened and everything.
Mm-hmm. I see. Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
So another question I have for you is, how strongly does Gleb feel about his Cossack identity? Does he ever feel like he doesn't really fit in because of his roots? Or does he ever feel like, maybe this isn't for me? Or is he the type of person who's like, yeah, this is for me?
I believe he's always, as soon as he got into it, he felt that this was for him because he never felt totally comfortable or fitting in as a serf. I mean, he's always had that kind of fierce drive to be, to do his own thing, to decide what he wants to do, to have his own agency. And I think he wants to be with people who also have that, because he doesn't like the idea of being dictated to or being subordinate to anything. Now, I mean, he believes in working together with, someone or some people in order to achieve a goal, but never in something that, demands for you to be subservient and just let some jackass decide your whole fate. If you just, mess up one little thing, you're dead.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That makes sense because as a serf, he was really powerless, and he saw
Yeah,
how the powerlessness affected Petya as well, even though he wasn't a serf.
exactly.
Mm-hmm,
Ironically, Petya, who was in like maybe one of the highest
mm-hmm,
positions you could have on the estate, virtually had no power. In fact, Petya kind of envies a little bit of the freedom
mm-hmm,
that Gleb has, and also
mm-hmm.
the fact that Gleb doesn't have the unfortunate stuff that Petya has to deal with.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. That makes sense why he wants to take his own, future into his own hands. He doesn't want to become another Petya.
Exactly. He
Mm-hmm,
doesn't want to end up like him, because that's pretty sad.
mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So in this incarnation, Gleb is half Tartar, right?
Yes, he is.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Right. Yes, exactly. And I think with that, it makes things a lot more easier to work with. It makes sense, but at the same time, when most people look at him, the first thing that'll come to their mind is that he's not your average fair, Slavic dude, like someone like Vidov, or like, Barry Taliban, you know what I mean? He's not that. And or like run of the mill, I mean, I don't want to say run of the mill, but like more average citizen, like what's his name? It's Saint, yes. Oh, what's his name? I know I can see it spelled before me. Asanin.
Oh yeah, Seinen, the poet, right?
Yeah, exactly. So he's
Yeah.
not Asanin. And people say, okay, I guess he's something with dark hair, dark eyed.
Mm-hmm.
Although his hair is kind of like a darkish reddish brownish.
Mm-hmm.
It sort of looks like it's kind of dark, but there's like a bit of red in it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really tell. Um, I guess maybe like with as far as features goes, I think his eyes are pretty normal. Although I think they're kind of like a dark hazelnut green that kind of look dark from far, but once you get up close, you're like, oh, they're hazelnut green.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the only thing that maybe might stick out a little bit is that his cheekbones are just a little bit too high, but no, not like those cheekbones I used to draw, which were a nightmare. No, not that. But you know what I mean? Like he just doesn't have that. You know what I mean? I mean, people will, see and say, okay, I don't know what this guy is, but whatever. They're not
Mm-hmm.
going to think, they're not going to make a big deal about it.
Mm-hmm.
I guess maybe a little bit, I guess maybe a tad bit like Nureyev to a degree.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Nureyev was Tartar, right?
Yeah, he was. He
Okay,
was.
okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I always thought he had like I always thought he had interesting features that, it's like you're not sure what to make of it. Like
Mm-hmm.
what is it? And but you know what I mean? It's not like you're going to instantly make race a big issue, because you're just going to think, okay, this is just a different flavor of white or something, you
That
know?
makes sense. I mean, I think Nureyev in the United States, he would just be considered white, right? He wouldn't be person of color.
No, he would be
Okay.
considered like white, you know, sort of, and then like
Hmm.
another Tartar dude, like Charles Bronson, you know,
Oh,
although
right. Yeah.
although
Yeah.
Charles Bronson, I guess because his features were more extreme or something, they always had him playing like Native Americans
Oh,
or
yeah, I read about that.
yeah, yeah, which is
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
weird,
But
but
he was
yeah,
considered white in the US anyways, despite looking Native American-ish.
exactly. He was considered
Hmm.
white, you know, so you know, that just sort of shows the ambivalence of,
Hmm.
you know, of those ideas. Um, so I mean, you know, Gleb is not going to really run into any kind of conflicts or problems,
Hmm.
and he doesn't even really think about it. Like he's like, I guess somebody told me I was like half Tartar. I really don't know. I really don't
Hmm. Hmm.
care. Um, I guess some people might think, oh, you know, he's got like unusual features or something, but no one's ever going to make a real big deal about it, you know.
Hmm.
Yeah. So it's like race or anything like that is not part of it, because it never it never brings any issues from him.
Hmm. Do you
And
think this is a better approach than your previous approach of how race was more in the center?
I think it is. I do believe it is, because I think well, you know, how do I say? Well, I think just one thing I wanted to add before I answer this question, him kind of having like those really like non-average Slavic features, I think it helps him blend in with the Cossack community more, because Cossacks, generally speaking, weren't like, you know, fair blonde Slavics. You know, they were mostly
Hmm.
like dark Ukrainians and things like that. You know,
That makes
um,
sense. Yeah, that
and
makes a lot
yeah,
of sense. Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
So and then of course you have to remember there's a lot of intermarriage with the you know, Caucasian ethnic groups and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but anyway, getting back to the approach of race, I think it is a lot better, because I think the problem was in the beginning, when I was trying to make it solely about race, and I went really extreme, like having him, you know, half Kalmuk and then making him look almost entirely Kalmuk. Um,
Hmm.
I think it caused a problem of where the race was being used as a plot device, and that can be a very wrong thing to do. I mean, it's like you want to do the right thing, like, oh, you know, you want more diverse representation, or
Hmm.
you think to yourself, I wonder if a person like this, how did they live life back then, because we never get that kind of perspective. It's usually like in
Hmm.
the
That's
past, where it was
true.
like, you
Hmm.
know, very much white folk territory. But um, the thing is, we don't have enough information available. Trying to fit that story into that narrative doesn't make sense. And you're doing the character a disservice by using race for politics. I know people are going to have a field day and get, you know, all mad about it and say you should do it anyway. But no, because you're doing a disservice to the people. Unless you have the information and can make a better story, like say if we
Hmm.
wanted to make him Kalmuk, like you know, maybe just make it like about him within the community of Kalmuks, and maybe try to make it about like how the Kalmuks that separated from the other Kalmuks formed the Don Kalmuks. You could make a really good story out of that.
Hmm.
But I don't have the resources to do that. And I also feel like me being not associated or part of that community, I just feel like it would be a little difficult for me to really venture into that.
Hmm.
And also, I
Hmm.
don't speak the language either, because like even though technically speaking, most of them, like the whole thing with Russian Federation, speaks Russian. I mean, they still have their own, you know, language for other historical records and such. And I just feel like it's not my right to step into that,
I see.
especially
Hmm.
since I'm just, you know, a random white American person. Of course, one might say, well, what gives you the right to do this with, you know, Gleb? But the thing is, Gleb, his race doesn't affect him, and he doesn't care to
Hmm.
research
Hmm.
about his other side, you know.
Hmm. That
Yeah,
makes sense. Hmm.
yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I agree with your point about not using race as, the focus of the story or as a plot device. I think it's kind of like being colorblind in a sense. You know how people are like, I don't see your race. But then if you turn race into, you know, the whole point of the story, it's kind of like the opposite side of that, you know?
It
Kind
is.
of
It
like
is.
the opposite of saying, hey, I don't see race. It's like, yes, all you see is race, and you see everything through the lens of race. And that can also be very problematic, in my opinion.
I agree with you fully on that point. It can become extremely problematic because you're making everything about race and then you're denying the character the right to be their own human, their own agency.
Mm-hmm.
They're just only being there to be kind of an avatar of a single ethnicity or racial group. And
Mm-hmm.
that is so wrong to do that. And I think that's what um kind of fails in a lot of people trying to do things with diversity. And I think that's why it
Mm-hmm.
failed making previously back then Andre, who is now Gleb, making him Kalmuk. I think that's what made it fail so bad.
I don't think it failed so bad. It was just that a lot of the time, I think that it was not finished. You know, you had so many ideas, but they didn't really necessarily lead to any conclusions because you never really finished a lot of the threads in the story. So it's really hard to say whether you quote unquote failed at the diversity thing because I don't think you really ever finished it.
I didn't, and I think also too, it was essentially trying to fit a round peg into a square hole, because we had this whole story of him, like, for example, realistically speaking, in a time point and location like that, would it be really possible for a young Kalmuk woman, to, sire a son with a white Russian aristocrat?
Mm.
That is so slim. And then
Mm-hmm.
all that happening, and here's the thing, like, certain times and locations, there's going to be things where interracial things will be more at a higher percentage of
Mm-hmm.
possibility than others. For example, like I said, let's take a look at Cossack communities. There's a lot of intermarriage.
Mm-hmm.
This is what kind of explains the Cossack ethnic makeup,
Mm-hmm.
and things like that, because I mean, you'll never know. Like, I mean, different Cossack communities could have very different ethnic genetics when you look at them.
Mm-hmm.
Like some of them could, well, like for example, like when you read something like "Quiet Flows the Dawn," um, the Melanchthonov family, has a lot of Turkish genetics because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of their ancestors, intermarried with Turkish people. So um, and so on and so on. But you're not going to really see that among aristocracy. That's not going to happen. I mean, you know, so that story of all that happening really wouldn't make sense. And it, like you said, there were a lot of threads that were left unfinished, and I think a lot of threads that just weren't, they weren't starting off good to begin with. Like
Mm-hmm.
knitting, if you don't, like with knitting, if you don't have the first link and chain done right, the rest of it, that's not going to hold. It's just going to fall, unravel.
Mm-hmm. I think one thing that I personally saw from my perspective as, you know, a non-white and a non-American was that when you first wrote Dusha or Andre as a Kalmuk, you really focused on the fact that everyone was pretty much extremely racist towards the fact that he wasn't white. I mean, I honestly thought it was a little bit unrealistic because, you know, during that time period, people just weren't exposed to other ethnicities. So I think they would just not, rather than be extremely racist, I think they would just be ignorant, and that's not necessarily the same thing as being really racist.
That's true. I believe you're right in that respect. I mean, racist, when we say the term racist, we think of something that's aggressive and hostile. So, technically speaking, I guess if someone like, say, Andre being like half Kalmuk and looking very, very Kalmuk, I think, like you said, it probably would be met with ignorance, curiosity, um, maybe not really hostile
Mm-hmm.
racism. I mean, I think my biggest take back or take away from it was that I just thought there'd be some sort of negativity because of the association with the like the Mongolian horde
Mhm,
thing,
mhm,
and being kind of seen as a remnant of that, and then
mhm,
not adhering to like these standards of conventional white phenotypes or like looks, you know what I mean? Like if you don't look white enough, then you know
mhm.
I mean it's always been like that. I mean, in a lot of
Societies.
white
Yeah.
dominated societies, yeah.
I think the main difference would be though that they're not in the States. I think the States and other like English speaking countries is where there's a lot of extreme hostile racism towards non-whites.
I think so. I mean, I don't know how racism really plays out in Russia. I mean, I'm always hearing stories like, oh, this happened and then like that. But, you have to ask yourself, is it really race or politics, or is it just like race associated with politics as opposed to like a genetic inherent thing?
I totally agree. It's really
Yeah.
hard to say.
Yeah, it is. I should ask, pardon me, hiccups. I should ask my friend in Russia how that all plays out. But she's not really someone to. She really doesn't put her ear to the ground of politics or race or society. She's more
Mhm.
of a. She's more of a. She's more of an artistic, literary type. So she's
Mhm.
not going to be thinking about those things or keeping her
Mhm.
ear on the ground of that.
Mhm. But yes, in general, like racial relations vary from society to society. And I
Right.
think that as artists and writers, we should really be more subtle about it rather than just say, hey, this is how America portrays race. And this is how
Right.
we should put, the American view of race into another story about another country and another society. I don't think that always works.
It doesn't. I think that was the problem. I think I was thinking of race and racism um, in the lens of how it is in America, and like you said, that it doesn't work. That doesn't apply to every society in every country. It doesn't, and also like different time frames, But I guess realistically speaking, now that I have like a little bit more information and more logic applied to it, if Gleb had been like half Kalmuk and looked very Kalmuk, like we said, he'd be probably treated with more curiosity and ignorance rather than, you know, vitriol hatred or anything like that. I
Hmm.
mean, maybe there might be some you know, dumb moron who, might have a chip on his shoulder about the Mongolian horde. I don't know.
No.
I don't know who would still have that. Like,
Mhm.
is anybody reading history book? Oh, I don't know. You look like the person who, oppressed my ancestors like 700 years ago or something.
Yeah, but realistically, back then, you have to remember people also didn't have, Instagram or YouTube or even TV. So they know that people from other countries look different, but would they know it when that person appears in front of them, that this person is equal to that ethnicity? Would they know that? Because they haven't been exposed to it through media or books or anything.
That's true, especially like serfs. Like in the serf
Hmm.
village, um, if they saw Gleb as half Kalmuk, looking very Kalmuk, um, they probably would say, "Gee, I wonder who he is." Beats me. And I guess he looks like those people down at the plains. I don't know who they are. They're weird. I guess he's kind of weird or something. And they're like, "Nah, he looks weird." And then I would that would be the extent of it, I think, in the surf village.
Probably, yeah. Because I mean, back then they didn't really know what other ethnicities looked like, right? They didn't
Right. Yeah. So
have
if they were
TV or
thinking of
books. I mean, even the books they had didn't have realistic pictures, so they wouldn't
no,
know. Yeah.
yeah, so it's like if they were thinking about, oh, being oppressed by Genghis Khan 700 years ago, they're not gonna know who Genghis Khan and uh his group looked like,
Mm-hmm.
and um, it's not like they have a history book like, hey, this looks a lot like that kid, and
Yeah.
I mean, well, that in itself is, damnably racist to say that, but you know, they're not going to think that. They're just going to think, I guess he's from somewhere over there with some folks or something, and all that. So I think realistically speaking, that's probably how it would go down. But I don't think it fits that. I don't think it fits the narrative of Gleb anymore. I think Gleb is not about race or anything like that anymore. Not that that would be the case, even if he was Kalmuk, but um, I just think it's better now how he's developed,
Mm-hmm.
um, and like I said, I mean, being half Tartar, I think maybe I think here's the thing. I think people like the Cossacks and people who are more in the countryside and more in close proximity with Tartars are gonna be like, yeah, whatever. They don't even think about it. I think the only people that are gonna like really notice, like, might be, I don't know, like some dumb shits in St. Petersburg or something. Like,
Okay, I see.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I don't know. I don't want to have another Goldman. you know,
Oh no.
I don't want that guy.
No, I actually thought he was cool though.
The way that he fanboyed over him.
Oh, I
I
didn't
thought he was,
remember that. I actually just recalled that he was just really happy all the time. What
yeah,
else
he,
was there about him?
okay. Well, the Goldman was a little problematic because this was when Gleb was half Kalmuk. He thought, oh my gosh, he's so exotic. Well, not exotic looking, but like so exotic looking. Like, oh my gosh, he's so handsome. Like, oh, he looks like a prince from the east.
Oh,
Like,
really? I don't remember that.
yeah, yeah. And he's like,
Oh, okay. So he's
you
like the
know, like
resident Orientalist.
he's a resident Orientalist. He's got God bless he's got bitten by the fever bug.
Okay,
And
that was funny though. I thought it was funny.
yeah, it was, and he's like, oh my gosh, I can already imagine wearing those lavish Mongolian clothes, like a glorious prince on a horse with arrows and stuff.
Oh, okay, I see. So that was what Goldman was about because I don't
Yeah,
remember. Yeah.
yeah, and I think he also had a man crush on him, like too much of a man crush.
Didn't multiple people have a man crush on him?
Yeah, they did. It was kind of weird. I think a couple of his men probably had a man crush on him, and
Oh,
like some of the people.
Sidorenko. That's his name. Do you remember
That
him?
was the
The guy who looks like Mayakovsky.
yeah. Uh-huh.
But
I'm glad we had
we
him.
don't need Sidorenko anymore because we have Andre.
Yeah, we have
We don't need
Andre.
two guys who look like Mayakovsky, right?
No,
That's
no,
too
we don't. We
much.
don't. We don't need Sidorenko anymore. In fact, it was thanks to Sidorenko we got
That's
the current
true.
one. Yeah,
Yeah. Hmm.
yeah, and yeah. So I mean, the only person I think that's gonna maybe do a double take and think, oh, Gleb looks kind of unusual, is probably gonna be some really pampered, sheltered, um, educated slash kind of ignorant, basic white aristocrat woman from St. Petersburg if she sees him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but
So
then
what is
again, if
she like the
I saw that,
Karen, the alternate Karen of this
yeah,
universe?
the Moscow, like 18th century Moscow version of Karen. That's
Go
horrifying.
back to where you came from.
I don't think she'd be racist though.
I'm
Like
joking.
she'd probably have a bit of Goldman syndrome, which you think, OMG, he looks so exotic with his dark, brooding eyes. Kind of like that dumbass reporter that was kind of making those weird ass comments about the baritone Vorostovsky.
Oh, really? There
Do you
was such a
remember? Do you
person?
remember?
Oh, I think you showed me the article years ago.
And she was like making those comments. I thought, what? What do you mean cold hooded Tartar eyes? Like, what are
Sounds like
you
this
doing,
racial
mom?
stereotype.
Thank you. I was like, okay. I mean, I agree. Vorostovsky's a hot, good-looking man. May he rest in peace, amen. But you don't need to describe him like that. You made him sound like something out of a bad film about Genghis Khan or something.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so probably some dumb, aristocrat woman from St. Petersburg is gonna think that Gleb looks exotic or something. But I don't think Gleb's gonna run into many of those. And I mean, even if he did, I think he'd probably be very tempted to run over them with his horse or
Oh
something.
my gosh. Yeah.
He definitely wouldn't be chivalrous towards them.
So another question I have is, what do you think you learned over the last couple of years about this story? Like, what do you think, that you've learned about story development from working on this story?
I think it's taught a number of lessons. I think the main one is to not always try to cram unnecessary elements. That's the first lesson of tragedy. You know, you don't have to make everything so extreme. That's not always realistic. I think a lot of times we try to make the world darker and crazier than it is in the wrong time and the wrong places. Um, and then, of course, we have the inversion of that where we try to sugarcoat things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think another lesson I've learned is to be more willing to look up more information, be more willing to adapt to certain things that may not fit what you wanted in the narrative. Because a lot of times, what you don't want initially and what you figure, well, I'll compromise and do this, it actually makes everything a lot better than it was before.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the final lesson I've taken away from this um, is not to let the character become plot devices or contrivances for audience feels. Let them be their own agents, even if it's, you know, something that doesn't really necessarily benefit the story. But what people are going to remember is when they're reading a book or something like that in the format, they're going to remember the characters. They're not going to so much focus on the plot, although the plot is important. I think what people want in a story like that, they want good characters. They just
Mm-hmm.
don't want
Mm-hmm.
fancy plot. You know, that's why, you know, for example, people don't watch Marvel movies for characters. I know there's dumb people on Tumblr that are going to say otherwise, but most people just watch Marvel for plots. They're not going to watch it because suddenly Thor is a very deep character, you know.
Well, they do it for shipping, though.
Well, yeah, but this is mostly people who are imagining things on, you know, AO3, you know.
That's true. But they watch the movies in order to imagine, right? I think.
Yeah, that's true, but they're going to look at plots. Like, for example, I don't think Marvel characters are at all that extraordinarily deep. I don't know, maybe Loki's got something going for him, but everybody else has about the most I shouldn't say it, but I'll say it anyway, about the depth of the pan.
I think it's just genre of the thing that limits it, right? I mean,
I
it's
think it's
supposed to
the
be a
genre.
blockbuster, so I can't judge it too harshly because most blockbusters are designed like that.
Exactly,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. And I've learned that you really can't apply that to writing. You know, I mean, yeah, maybe it might make a cool plot for people to read, and it's like young adult stuff, you know, because
Mm-hmm.
that's what young adult fiction is, really. It's
Mm-hmm.
just good, you know, like, oh, elaborate plots, you know, this happened and then that happened and then she did this, but he said that. And that's all fine
Mm-hmm.
and dandy, but the characters are about as bland as a fried egg.
I think Twilight's an exception because I don't
Please.
think there was a plot. I mean, the characters, I mean, no offense, they were not that great, but at least they kind of had a personality, but there was no plot in Twilight. It was just them getting together and then like something about her turning into a vampire at the end. But it took 3 books for her to become a vampire.
Yeah, and then I guess everybody remembers about that kid and that werewolf.
But there wasn't really a story per se. It was just the characters interacting.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I have to, Twilight Defense League. The Twilight Defense League, I'm
But yeah,
sorry.
but seriously, Twilight is not the kind of book that you read for the plot. You read it for the quote unquote character interaction. Or is it for the love triangle, I think?
I think it's for the love. I mean, I guess for young adults, like, oh, love triangle, Edward, Team Jacob. I'm sorry,
Such a long time ago. Such a long
yeah,
time ago.
that was like 10 years ago, and like,
Yeah, we're old.
yeah, we're old. We remember those old wars. I remember the old Twilight War.
Yeah, but like young people these days, they read like stuff that's way less, I don't know, stupid, I think. Because like I think a lot of the books coming out for kids now are more like queer friendly and not just like like Twilight, which was not queer friendly. It had like no queer representation.
Exactly, or his Dark Materials, which had like the worst queer representation.
Oh God, the angels. It was
Yeah.
so stereotypical. It couldn't get any worse.
Good God. And Pullman wants to call himself progressive. I thought,
Well,
thank
he's
you.
old though, so I kind of forgive him because he wrote it in the 90s and there was no
That's true.
queer representation back then.
No,
He's like
that's true. That's
75
true.
right now.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, I mean, I guess the only one we can't forgive is Rowling with her dumping. Oh, Dumbledore was gay. Like, oh wow, what evidence was that? I thought he was pretty damn straight.
It was just
JK.
queer baiting.
Yeah.
I mean, they tried so hard to put stuff in it, but like, it's just like, oh yeah, by the way, Hermione might be black. But
Or like now,
the cover does not show that.
it does not. No, no, it doesn't. And then like, I think with that Fantastic Beast prequel, they were trying to put like shipping between Dumbledore and some other dude. I forget. And Jude Law.
Grindelwald.
Yeah, Grindelwald. And then like Jude Law and I guess Johnny Depp are trying to like give each other eyes or something. I don't
Really? I
know.
didn't even see that.
I
Oh
saw
my
some clips
gosh.
from it, but then again, I don't know. Johnny Depp's insane.
Oh
And
yeah, he's like a, he beat his wife, right?
I don't know. They said
What
that
did
his
he
wife
do?
beat him,
Oh God, I
so
don't
I
even know
have
what's
no idea
happening.
what
I
happened.
just know he's
Maybe they were
problematic
beating each
now.
other.
He's
Huh?
canceled.
Well, no, but now they say he's not canceled
Oh
because
really?
yeah, because they said that his wife was beating him. So I have no idea.
Oh, I don't know, man. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. Depp is just weird. I've never really liked him in anything. Why does Tim Burton use him for every damn thing? I was pretty pissed off with that Dark Shadows adaptation. If they wanted to get somebody to play Barnabas Collins, they could have got Jeremy Irons, but they didn't. So there.
I see. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for joining us today. This was an excellent interview, and we learned so much about your writing process and how you've developed Andre, or now Gleb, over the years.
Well, thank you so much. I'm really honored to be a part of this interview. Thank you for asking me all these wonderful questions. It was very articulate. We had a very rewarding interview, and I thank you so much for your thoughtful and articulate questions.
All right. Till next time.
Till next time, see you. Thank you.
See you. Bye.
Bye.